Hi, I'm Dr. Gabella, and I'm going to talk about brain health and why it is so important, what our brain controls, and neuroplasticity, because that's the main idea that our brains can change and we have control over how our brain works and ultimately the success of our life. So brain health and why it's so important. Now, to clear up and let's get all on the same page about things, a lot of people don't realize that not only do our brains create who we are as people, so it creates our personality, and it creates our emotionality and how happy we are, and if we're depressed or if we have anxiety, how we interact in the world, our social skills, our problem-solving skills, how successful we are in our career, but it also has it literally controls the whole entire body. So it has a massive effect on every single organ function. And literally all of our organs, before they release any hormones, our endocrine system and immune system is all controlled by releasing hormones in the brain. So first, the brain releases hormones. It sends to all of our organs, our heart, our lungs, our kidneys, our stomach, and it tells those organs what to do and how to function. So it controls the health of our whole body. A good brain means a good, strong body, good physical condition, as well as good intelligence, good emotionality. To sum it up, if you think about the best brain, it's going to be a person that's the most intelligent, the most charming, and great connection and people skills. They're going to be the most successful, most physically fit. They feel well, they're happy, they're prosperous, and they're exceptionally successful. So really, at the end of the day, if we had to think about it, the greatest long-term investment is investing in your brain health. Now, the reason why this is so exciting for us is because the longest time we used to think that our brains were not plastic and that they were very static and kind of like you are born or you have what you're born with and you're a victim of your genes and there's nothing much you can do. And then now we look at, when there's injury, there's not too many treatments to get people better when they suffer from neurological conditions. Well, the truth is, and it's really exciting from the research world to the clinical world, that our brains are constantly changing, and you can change somebody's brain, and when you do, you change your life. If you think about it all day long, it's brains that rule the world. So it's brains that are making decisions in politics, in the stock market, in the mom and pop stores, in our school systems, in our careers, and every single thing that happens in this world as a whole, whether it's in China, whether it's in Australia, or in the United States, everywhere. It is brains that make these decisions, and collectively it creates humanity. It creates our world. So if you want a better world, it starts with better brains, and it starts with recognizing, these mental disorders or depression or behavior disorders or emotional things. And if you look at murders and killings and all this bad stuff that ultimately happens in the world, those aren't conditions. Like, you can't label them as schizophrenia and things like that. What it is that the problem is not the behavior by any means. The problem is the damage in the brain. And we look at all sorts of SPECT scans and fMRIs, and every single person, whether you're a murderer, whether you just have all these depression disorders, it shows in these scans, and it shows that there's massive amounts of changes in blood flow to these areas, the functionality of these areas, how often these areas are firing, whether they're overfiring or underfiring. It's all completely a result of how your physical brain is functioning. But it's a happy day when you can say that there are huge possibilities to make changes in the brain. So whether we're dealing with a child with ADHD or an adult with ADHD, or you're dealing with anxiety and stress and depression, or just mental fatigue, slow mental processing, memory loss, we can all change our brains, and we can make adaptive patterns in our circuitry to make things better, and that's phenomenal. At the end of the day, what really comes down to the key of neuroplasticity, but the key of keeping a good brain, is being able to make the correct adaptive circuits. So all day long, our brains are rewiring. So every time we learn something, they're obviously rewiring because we're learning something. But every time you interact with somebody, you walk away from that person changed. There's something in you is changed. Your genes create different proteins, and it's changed. And the way that happens is our brain literally creates new synaptic connections all day long, 24/7 all day long. So if I were to get up and I walk into another room, my brain is going to instantly fire an adaptive pattern, and it's going to create a new circuit that's going to map out my physical world in that new room, and it's going to remap out the accuracy of my body map so that I can successfully interact with my world and environment, not bump into things, not trip over things, and that's happening completely unconsciously. Same thing with, every single day we are a little bit different just because we're constantly affected by our environment. So who we are as people, how we think, our thought systems are as a result of changes in the brain. This is really incredible to put in perspective, because if our brains are constantly changing and adapting, number one, if we lose our adaptation mechanisms, that's going to cause a major issue. And we see we've recently discovered Parkinson's is not a motor disorder. Parkinson's is a failure to have adaptation patterns to motor, to cognition, and to emotionality. So they're depressed, they lose their cognitive abilities, they're slow, they freeze, they have bradykinesia, they have camptocormic posturing with the tremor and shuffling gait because they can no longer make adaptive gait patterns to stand up and just walk simply. But now if somebody gets a concussion, or if somebody's exposed to a toxin in their environment or has a poor diet that ends up being toxic for their nervous system, and they're getting all these little damages to their brain, they're now decreasing their ability to adapt all of these patterns. And eventually, all day long, we're changing our motor patterns and our body maps, and we're adapting to things because we're doing new things, we're interacting with new things. Well, if we're not creating these correct adaptations, we now develop all these skews in our body maps, skews in how we process our visual world, our environment. That's huge, and you see this with vertigo and dizziness and migraines and headaches and positional orthostatic tachycardia, or people get lightheaded when they sit up, go from sitting to standing. How many people have poor focus ability? Poor focus ability is a result of our brain kind of going down south. We lose our ability to function at the perfect potential. So the moral of all this really comes down to the fact that majority of us don't have the best brains that we could possibly have. And if you're symptomatically at a stage that you're feeling that, that means it's a very serious thing. And you should take it serious, and you should harness the idea of neuroplasticity, because what's incredible is the brain can change so quickly with very little effort, which is new. I mean, we didn't know this until the past 10 years. And really, the three key gems that are a blessing from our Creator are our vestibular system, our visual system and eye movements, and our somatosensory system, which is our joints and our muscles, and somatosensory meaning somatic and motor and sensory combined together. Those three systems are so vital for everything we do. They're vital for just getting up and walking, but they're vital for cognitive thought. So for being Einstein, those are vital. And those three systems can literally map the whole entire brain because they fire collateral pathways to all brain structures. So you would think, if somebody has dizziness and vertigo, it seems completely unrelated. I could say, okay, yeah, that's a vestibular problem, or maybe it's a cerebellar problem because that allows our balance. What's crazy is that we're finding more and more that our cerebellum is, yeah, sure, it's involved in coordination and motor stuff, but it actually has a massive, massive, massive input to our cognition. So cognition meaning our intelligence, our IQ, how bright we are, how quickly we learn things. We would have never thought 5 years ago that was like a cerebellar base, but it so much is. So just as much as you can have cerebellar dyskinesis or dysmetria, meaning you go to touch something. So if I go to touch my nose and touch my thumb, this is metric, right? So I'm hitting my thumb, I'm hitting my nose. Dysmetric would mean I'm missing it. I overshoot, or like I don't hit it accurately. Well, you have that same exact pattern with your thoughts. So if you've ever went to go say something, but you couldn't gather your thoughts, or you felt like you weren't saying it properly. People have this struggle all the time. And same with emotions. I mean, how many times have you seen people freak out? They can't control their emotions so well, and they have dysmetric processing of their emotionality. It's huge. You can't be successful in your job with that happening. But what's a really happy day is that you could take and break down. So the areas of the brain that, let's use the frontal lobe, for example. So the person with the best frontal lobe is going to be the smartest person, the most charming, the most successful at their job, the best social skills, all that good stuff. honestly, the person you admire most in the world is going to have the best frontal lobe. Let's put it like that. Now, in the brain, we know that the frontal eye fields, right, and it's an area of the frontal lobe, we know that it controls the initiation of saccades. I can quantify the speed of initiation of a saccade. A saccade is a fast eye movement. So if I'm looking here and I look here, that's a fast eye movement. It's a saccade. I can quantify that and control and measure it and say, okay, here's what it is. So if somebody has to have 2 jumps to get to a target, or if somebody is very slow, or they're jerky, you're having saccadic intrusion all day, so instead of having a pursuit, they're having saccadic intrusion. Those are pathological, and those take so much energy. But what's crazy is those same areas that control those eye movements, because eye movements are literally what we rely on 24/7 to map out our world so that we can accurately interact with our world and talk to people and know where things are with no problem. So that same area of the brain that controls that saccade, it also controls your cognition, your ability to focus, how well you get emotionality. We always hear about the story of Phineas Gage that had a rod through his frontal lobe, and he completely lost social skills, social norms, proper behavior, proper emotionality, to actually feel emotions. He lost who he was as a person. It was completely destroyed because he destroyed his frontal lobe. So this area of the brain controls all this stuff, the stuff that seems completely unrelated to a fast eye movement. And I can't really quantify somebody's personality. I can't really, like, you can do a survey, a questionnaire, sure, but there's no solid data to that. Well, I know that the exact neuronal pool that controls these saccades also controls this other stuff. If I can go in and I can change the speed of initiation of a saccade or the velocity of a saccade, and I can make it within the windows of normal limits or optimum, I know that if I've made that change, the probability of those neurons now going in and getting better, improving, and then improving all those other functions is really, really high because it's all the same neuronal pool. So that's the magic of neuroplasticity and brain rehabilitation, and how you make such huge change by going down to our 3 systems that are constantly processing our sensory stuff and allowing us to just walk and be upright in gravity. That's our vestibular system. Our vestibular system is vital so that we can stand up in gravity, go from sitting to standing. Right now, as I'm sitting down, I have a markedly different demand on my heart rate, respiratory function, shunting blood to all my limbs, shunting blood to my brain, breathing. I'm sitting, I'm at rest. And guess what's telling my brain that I'm sitting at rest? It's my vestibular system, my otolithic system. So it tells it that, and I have my baroreceptors being affected by gravity, and I have a certain heart rate and a certain blood pressure. But the minute I go from sitting to standing, I'm now going to translate in gravity. It's going to be my otolithic system in my inner ear that's going to sense this translation, and it's going to fire up to my brain and say, oh, she's standing up. We have to completely change our autonomic nervous system, and we have to shunt blood up to the brain, and we have to now change the demands for blood to get to all of our body parts. And it's the same thing if I'm running. I better have a change in my heart rate and my respiratory rate and my blood pressure. And it's so that I survive, so that I'm living in my world. That is a massive system. And otolithic system is the one system never turns off. And gravity, phenomenal, but it's the one system that never goes away. And that's incredible because that is what creates our default network system. So it literally keeps us alive while we're laying down at night with our eyes closed, completely at rest. And technically, majority of everything in terms of stimulation is gone except gravity. And it's firing to your thalamus, and it creates this default network because here's the thing. If a neuron doesn't get activation or doesn't get fuel delivery, which comes in the form of blood, and it's going to be oxygen and glucose, those neurons die. So these things keep us alive and vital. We can use them to remap circuits in the brain so that our brain function is functioning at optimum potential. This is huge. This is huge for simple things, just being able to pay attention, being able to not be dizzy, remapping somebody that's had repetitive concussion in sports. Look at all these concussion athletes. It's coming out. I mean, if you have seen the movie Concussion, it's nuts. It's insane. These people lose their lives. They're depressed. They kill people. They commit suicide. They sabotage their marriage. There's divorce. There's all those terrible things because their brain is so damaged that they have lost who they are as people. If you look in the criminal system, people who murder other people, they have a really bad brain. Their brain is damaged. And what's crazy, instead of locking them up, fixing their brain so that they can get back into society and work and pay taxes and give back and further humanity is much more of a gift than to just have people locked up. And, you know, even when they're let out, they're still really bad people because their brains were not treated. And ultimately, if you want to talk about higher living and altruism and becoming the highest person you can be and the best person you can be and reaching the high success and becoming a millionaire and all this great stuff and making good decision after good decision, it takes a really good brain. So I'm really excited about brain health. I'm super excited about neuroplasticity. I love my job and what I do because of the fact that I get to make such massive differences. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you.